Hello and welcome back to another edition of TWE Meets, where today we'll be picking the brains of tipster and now freelance sports betting correspondent Charlie McCann, who's been in the racing industry for numerous years now, working for the likes of TalkSport, Bet Victor, and today we're going to be talking all things horse racing. Charlie, welcome to TWE Meets. Thanks for coming on. How is everything?
I'm fine, James. I wouldn't pass the vet. I'll never pass the vet again, but that apart, I mean, I'm dangerously good form, yeah.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So I guess we've got to start at the top, Charlie, and having been in and around the industry for quite a long time now, how did you get your love for racing and how did you get into it?
Well, the first race meeting I went to when I was quite young was my auntie and uncle came up from Ireland via London to watch the Grand National in 1972, and the Grand National will be a lowest common denominator. In almost everything sort of was back to one horse race, not one particular race, but the greatest horse race in the world, the Grand National. And I never really was that interested. I was more interested in play. I always remember, I think it was quite a dank day. It was well-to-do in 1972. And there weren't that many people there. And I was sort of fascinated why my aunt and uncle would be particularly interested in the Grand National. I then went further on. I went to university. I'll always remember, I never backed it, but for auction, winning the champion hurdle in I think 81, and I was at university at the time. And I was beginning then to get more and more interested. And some days I would go into the bookies. Not that I was still an avid reader, say. I never had the sporting life that was at the time, but I was beginning to, and as my sort of sporting career was giving way to sort of arthritis and things like that, I began to take more and more interest in sport and then sports writing. And I was fortunate enough to get a couple of extremely fortunate breaks. That's, again, I think luck plays such a part. And then I became more and more, I'll always remember, when my cricketing career was, and I knew then that horse racing was beginning to take over. We were playing Oxton away, and I'd already gone down from the first team to the second team. I was playing for Bootle in the Liverpool competition, and we won the toss, and everyone expected us to bowl first, and I decided to bat, and I decided to open the batting myself. And I had one eye on the clock because I knew Baron Ferdinand was running in the Magna Cup, and I knew had to be out. Just sure. So I got out with plenty of time to spare. And I knew then that maybe cricket was not maybe my first love anymore, or Everton was not my first love anymore. And I'm afraid to say horse racing. And then that took over almost sort of full time. And I was, I was an avid reader, and I was getting, more and more into the anti-post side. And then again, I did get that fortunate break.
Yeah, honestly, it's a great story because we ask a lot of our people who come on the show, and it's everyone's got a different style. Everyone's got that one moment where they really knew they got into horse racing. Obviously, you've been an avid sports person, like obviously you cricket, like you mentioned, and stuff like that. So to know how you started to get into horse racing is brilliant. It's brilliant to hear. So because you've been in in the industry now of horse racing for quite a number of years, you've probably seen loads and loads of things. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, you were with Victor Channel, obviously now Bet Victor. Just want to, on little topics, I just want to start off with, how do you think the industry from when you first got into it, either when you were loving it and started to read, or when you started working in it, so how do you think the industry is now? Would you say it's better off now, or do you think there's better before? Is there different bits of both that you would have?
Well, when you get, old people automatically think that, it's never quite as good, but it's not as, it is better now, I think. In my time, the phone was more used for, to phone a bet through. Now, of course, your phone is your sort of office almost. And, there were no exchanges, and for a period of time in horse racing, Betfair specifically sort of ruled the roost. And, there are other things like Build-A-Bet in sort of sports betting, and obviously the online and the maturation in the 20 odd years I've been involved in the business. That has, it's a totally different landscape. And now, of course, it's changing again. it is now much more mature a business, the online gaming industry, and that's got to go with the times as well. And know your customer and the affordability checks. We still don't categorically know what's going to come into the Gambling Act. But it's not going to be, I don't think, great news. I don't think it's certainly going to be great news for horse racing. And I think even further down the line, I think it'll have a sort of knock-on effect as well. And when you have this seemingly this sort of winter discontent, and you have Joe Chewett and you have Harry Dunlop retiring, you worry, and the exodus of horses and things like that. It is difficult. But going back, to 20 years, I've been fortunate enough to work for a number of, and when you say Victor was and still is, he sent me earlier this year an autographed copy of his book, and it's a great read. And he was pioneers, and I've been involved with a couple of pioneers in the gaming industry. Shouldn't forget Peter Fisher at Stan James. Peter was really, if the older viewers will know the Teletext 389, Stan James, Peter Fisher was the first person to introduce in-play betting. He was on golf, and he just woke up one night and said, why should you be able to just have a bet on the Wednesday or the Thursday before they went out in the golf tournaments, and then for 72 holes, just watch it and think, oh, I'd like to get out of this and such, or I'd like to sort of top up this and whatever, which of course the exchanges and cash, this is well before sort of cash out. But Peter was a pioneer as well. And Peter was being such a nice guy. The word on the street, certainly here in Gibraltar, is that Peter was such a nice guy that the Bet365 were just starting, and they came for the in-play betting and learned the ropes off Peter. But they were maybe more commercially orientated and reinvested in the technology. But Peter and Fisher, and of course Victor, were pioneers. Victor, of course, led the exodus down to offshore. Well,
like you say, in-play betting is one of the biggest betting stories at the moment, isn't it? That you've got every bookmaker that is doing it now. And it's lovely to hear, because I don't know this stuff. If you're talking back a few years, that I didn't know that Peter Fisher was the one that really got that going. All you see is the big firms like your Bet365 and stuff like that come along and do start the in-play. So that's great to hear. But one I just want to touch back on and go slightly back to that we just touched on was the affordability checks. Obviously, it's going to be a massive thing for horse racing. Obviously, we're still a bit in limbo with obviously the new things that's coming out with the Gambling Commission and stuff like that. But I just want to get your opinion on, I know we touched on it then, but like you say, with some trainers that like Harry Dunlop and stuff like that, and Joseph Chewett coming out and saying then they're not going to be training on anymore. Do you think that's had a knock-on effect because of the affordability checks, and do you think it's only going to get worse?
Well, it can't get any better in the short term. Of that, there can be, when you have this cost of living crisis, and you're going to have in every walk of life, I think you're going to have firms, especially the smaller firms, unfortunately can't afford the fuel bills, etc. One of my concerns as well, if the UK, with things like affordability checks, with KYC, of course you've got to know your customer. You've got to set. But I do think I'm a believer in responsible gaming, but that's a two-way. It's a two-way street. Know your limits, set yourself realistic, and I do think we as punters have got to take responsibility as well. That said, I'm fed up. Now reading, let's say, for example, EGR, and one of the bigger firms recently was fined an extraordinary amount of money, and it seems to be the standard reply now. Oh, it wasn't on our watch. Well, whose watch was it? It's almost as if that is, and the monies they are being, and again, and the word here is that one of the major companies again is going to be hit with an even bigger fine in the next couple of weeks or months. That's a sort of trite phrase. Oh, it wasn't on our watch. Crack on. Let's crack on. So, they have, and going back, I think there's no question that the gaming companies did have, and that there was. It's just that, has it gone too far with things like affordability checks, where I worry as well with this, with more and more companies who either will punters, because if I want to bet, I think punters will find a way to have a bet. Whether that's with legal companies with a UK license, I don't know. I hope so. That is still the case. But I worry that if I am, I've got my shareholders say to answer to, and should I be spending my marketing, let's say on UK horse racing, where the market is either depreciating or stagnating, or should I go to markets such as maybe the Far East or Canada or India, where they are emerging markets? And I worry again further down along the line, for horse racing, they've got other problems like horses going overseas for increased prize money, sort of at the top end. Not the Derby winners, not the Group 1 horses, but those horses rated sort of 90, say to 185 to 100. There is too much horse racing as well. Of that, there can be no doubt. But, I wouldn't worry that only 4 meetings this year, because these things have taken time. Now, with people like William Haggis coming on board, I do think for 2024, we will see a 20-25% decrease. But I'm more worried that all this is having a detrimental effect. The new gambling laws, the marketing spend of gaming companies may be going into different regulations, jurisdictions, less horse population, trainers going by the wayside, maybe race courses going by the wayside as a result. And these are, make no bones about it, this is not just, this is more the start, I think, of a very difficult time, I think, for the horse racing industry.
Yeah, like you've just touched on, then I think there is a lot of these factors having knock-on effects, and that was why I really wanted to get your opinion on this, because it is a massive talking point in the world of racing at the moment. And like you've just touched on there, I do want to touch on another topic, is the race meetings, how many there is. Yeah, I think it was released last Wednesday. There'll be 1,478 meetings for 2023, which on the list at the moment, which are obviously only 4 below what this year's list was. A lot of trainers are coming out, a lot of pundits are coming out and basically saying the UK market especially, I know it's very different over in Ireland, they don't have as many meetings at all, but it is a very saturated market when it comes to how many races on in a week. You see in fields like, I think it was last week at Fontwell, where there was only 3 runners, 4 runners, 3 runners again in fields. And what's your opinion on this? I know there is too much racing, but how much racing it does like the UK customer base need?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when the jump season finished around about the Whitbread and then started, I think, on the end of July in Abbott and Devon and Exeter. It was called Devon and Exeter at the time. And there was quite a long gap. And of course, it would sometimes run on firm ground and maybe even hard ground. And there would be, there'd be a few trainers who would mop up those, and towards the end became people like Martin Pipe. I think there should be a bigger gap. I do believe that in 12 months' time, we will see a massive loss of meetings. We really will. I think the noise has come up, but of course, at that time, the BHA have had to sort of go to the race courses and things on the RCA and things like that. And it's taken time. And I think if they had the time again and could put it back a couple of months, I think they would. I'm sitting here, in the end of August, and tomorrow there are 3 all-weather meetings in the afternoon. That's all. 2 of them are on Tipster in the Midlands, in one in Sutherland, one at Wolverhampton. Now, I know the Southern one has been changed from an ARC meeting at Bath, but why just not postpone that at all? 3 Tipster, 2 Tipster meetings, both in the Midlands, and 1 polytrack meeting. It's at least 1 too many. And then, of course, there's 2 meetings at night, which is better, I think, the Worcester and Hamilton meeting. Although I'm quite an advocate of all-weather meeting. I think there are some racing snobs who look down the nose at it. I'm certainly not that. I just think that is almost symbolic. When Bath was abandoned due to the firm stroke hard ground, why just not say, okay, that's abandoned? I know ARC will have their reasons, and the owners of Sutherland and Bath race courses, but I think that is, just an example that there are far too many. But I think in this time next year, James, that we'll have 25% decrease in meetings.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that needs to happen for the good of racing. Really, you don't want to see these small fielded races all the time. Like if you look at the weekend just gone, if you look at some of the biggest race at Goodwood, probably with the Celebration Mile, and had what 5-6 runners in the race. That's not good enough, is it, for a Group 2 that's normally getting better horses into that race?
Well, I think ITV Racing's showed that, you know, there's only a population of so many horses who can run in that. And of course, with the Moulin, with Jacqueline Marouane and things like that, and they were saying how many options these horses, you know, had in that short period, in this July, August sort of window. And they wonder why they only get sort of 5. I think, you know, I would personally like somebody like William Haggis, you know, to be involved, and then maybe I'm sure that, you know, the NTF are involved in it. But if you get such a, you know, and again, you could say, oh, there's a millionaire horse racing trainer, you know, William Haggis advocating, he's not going to lose a great deal by, you know, the 20%. But I do think he's got the interests of racing at the core. You know, his family are all sort of involved. But again, there is too much, you know, racing, and when I mean that, not just to piece of races, there are too many options as well, maybe and that's by definition going to lend to 4 or 5 runner races.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And just another thing on that similar line, and I know it happened about a month or so ago at Newbury, where the trainers boycotted the last race on the card, and I think it was on ITV, that whole card at Newbury, and it went down to a 6 race card from a 7, and the whole argument was about prize money. Where do you stand on this? Because obviously we've already talked about the quality of field sizing, but how do we rectify the issue of basically getting the prize money back, getting the better horses to race against each other and not being able to go against each other? Does it just come to dilute the race and the prize money will get better, or does something else need to change?
Well, again, whilst there are 1,400 and so much, you know, and then the prize money is going to stagnate. If I think that maybe the levy in the next 2 or 3 years is going to go down, if I think marketing spend of gaming companies who sponsor an awful lot of horse racing meetings, if I think that their marketing spend may go elsewhere, then you know, I'm sorry, I'm not as optimistic as others that just culling the number will. But of course, increased prize money is you know, if you go to other jurisdictions, especially sort of Hong Kong, which I can see, you know, is sort of taking off a number of not the very, very top class, but good sort of horses rated the 85s, 90 pluses to run in that jurisdiction. And of course, when do they race? Yeah, I know it's only a small sort of community, but they race, of course, twice a week for whatever, 9 or 10 months a year.
Well, you're seeing people like Sylvester de Souza going over to Hong Kong because he can't ride as many horses over here. You're seeing, I remember horse, I think it was called Thesis, that won the Britannia Stakes. That was bought, but to go over to Hong Kong. Because you are right. You're seeing these types of horses, and you probably, I think America's another one where horses will be sent over to, because the prize money is a lot better than what it is in the UK and England at the moment. So yeah, definitely something that probably the racing world needs to look at. So moving on to something that's on a similar line of topic, but it's the Cheltenham Festival. It's the greatest racing occasion of the year. I'm a massive jumps fan. I do like the flat as well, but I'm a massive jumps fan. And I was unhappy really to hear it go to 5 days, even though I am a massive Cheltenham Festival fan. I was unhappy to hear it go to 5 days. I think it's next year, and not the 4 days. Where do you stand on this? Do you think it's a good thing it's going to 5, or? Because what I remember before, it was 3 days, wasn't it? Then went to 4. So to now have 5 days, I just think, like we've been discussing about the racing, the best horses can just avoid each other, can't they?
Well, they could still do that on the road to Cheltenham. They could easily, especially if you know, some of the best horses, you know, are in certain just 1 or 2 yards in 2 or 3 yards in, let's say, Elliott, Mullins and de Bromhead in Ireland, and Nichols, Henderson. Hopefully Fergal O'Brien will get more and more, because you know, he's, I think, on the rise. But yeah, I'm 4 days maximum. I know every other major race in the calendar, the Derby, the Arc de Triomphe, both all of 5 major classics, the Irish classics, are raced on Saturday or Sunday. But I like the idea of the Gold Cup being midweek. But 4 days for me as well. If I've been to the Cheltenham Festival and you know, I paid X amount and I'm expecting 7 races, and from, I don't think it's set in stone just yet, but I think, you know, I think everybody thinks that it will become from 24 onwards, 5-day meeting. It wouldn't be for me, no. 4 more is not necessarily better in this instance.
Yes, I'm a similar opinion to yourself. So now we've talked about a lot of the topics in racing, the current affairs stuff at the moment. Let's get more into your racing history. And what would you say is your favourite memory in racing today? You can either be one that's one race that you've landed that's your best bet, or just a memorable race from a class angle that you thought, I'm never going to watch anything like that again.
I would think my most memorable, something that about, I don't remember, when did Comply or Die win the Grand National? I think it was, again, it comes down to the Grand National, remember, James, everything comes back to the Grand National. About 2007, 2008, Comply or Die won the Grand National, and the weights launch was held in a hotel in say, let's say the Dorchester, I have no idea if it was, and I was invited. And I went in with Mark Winstanley, the Couch, one of the great characters, an absolutely wonderful, wonderful man who knew a lot more people than me. And in walked Martin and David Pike. And the Couch knew them, we got chatting away. And I started talking to David momentarily, and I said, you do know you're going to win the Grand National this year? And he said, oh, right. What with? And I said, Comply or Die. And he went, right. He looked at me as if I was soft Joe. And it popped. Anyway, Claire Balding and I think Nick Luck were going through and David at that time, through, you know, one of his leading owners, David Johnson, had about sort of 7 or 8 horses. And Claire Balding and Nick Luck invited David onto the stage. And they asked him about 12 of his 13 horses. And it's obvious, the one they didn't ask about, or he didn't sort of say, was Comply or Die. Anyway, so I went home to, because I backed it on the exchanges that morning when I got the weights through, and I thought, anyway, he ran in the Idis chase and won off top weight. And then he was only about 3rd or 4th favourite for the Grand National. And he won the Grand National. Now, I was going to race from where I was in the stands, and I just decided no, because basically all I wanted to do was gloat. So I didn't, and I saw David the next week, I think it was, at Newbury. And I went up to him and said, and he just looked at me. I said, Comply. It was bloody you, wasn't it? Racking my brains to tell me, to remember who told me that Comply or Die was going to win. So I said, yeah. Anyway, about 2 weeks later, I was in working for Stan James. I got this envelope, and in it was a picture of David, Minnie Homer, who had won the Grand National for the yard, and Comply or Die with David, and just signed by David at the bottom, and just said, at least somebody knew. And I've obviously still got that to this day. And out of numerous sort of, you know, the first time I met Henry Cecil, you know, and I was almost, you know, I was very emotional and things like that. And you're, again, I keep coming back to sort of look, but that would be one of the most sort of just off the top of my head sort of moments that I cherish, I think, from racing. And
that's an unbelievable story, absolutely unbelievable story. And for him to send that on to you after as well, it's just
that's the thing. The fact that he took time, and he would know where Stan James, he would know that we were in based, but he's obviously taken the time. And I think I found out later that he rung up the head office and said, where is your, where is he based? And got the address. I think it was very, very kind of him.
Yeah, that's an absolutely brilliant story. So moving more now on to you as a punter. Obviously, you've been punting in the industry for numerous years now, but what would you say, just for some of the viewers watching, what would you say, what tips and advice would you have for people betting in the sport that could try and make them a bit more profitable? Is it a certain way you bet? Is it anti-post betting, or is it if you have something you like you just like chase race, or you just like hurdle races, just stick to them. What would you say is a key advice for betting on horses?
I tend, from a betting perspective, to specialise. So it's on the flat from around about a mile upwards, largely handicaps. I'm not really interested in juvenile races, either over hurdles until about December, or 2-year-old races. I'll have the odd bet and things like that. I don't really bet in sprint handicaps as much. Please don't think these are, in pillars of salt. No, of course, if you watch as much racing as I do, you think, oh, I think that was unlucky and things like that. But I tend to, that is what, and I think that is a key advantage punters have over bookmakers who've got to price up every race. And, it's very difficult. It's difficult for them. I would say be selective. Don't obviously chase your losses. Set yourself realistic targets and bet within your means. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it. And if at the end of the year, do keep a record. If at the end of the year you can come out on top, well, that's great. That really is. But it is a sport. It's been so good to me. But it is. And for the 19 whatever percent of people, it's a fun thing. And make sure you continue to bet wisely and within your means.
Yeah, that's some great advice, definitely. So keeping on the punting side of things, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I know our viewers be wanting to know just some horses that you've got in the back of your mind at the moment. Let's start with the flat. Obviously, we've only got probably a month or so left of the flat before the jumps really starts going. But is there a horse or 3 horses, let's say, that you'd say follow for the rest of this flat season, or maybe a 2-year-old's going into next season?
Well, again, 2-year-olds probably no. I saw a horse in the Racing League a couple of weeks ago, World Without Love, I think it's called, of Charlie and Mark Johnston's. And I'm sure there's more. I think it's she. I'm sure there's more to come from that. She's a 3-year-old, I think 3-year-old filly, who I think will be winning. That showed me she could go. I think that was at Newcastle, so it'll be on to Peter and quite deep. So I think she'll go on soft ground when it arrives, and I think she's well handicapped. Cresta was very, very impressive, and I thought the time was good. Forget the good to soft bit but it's a horse that I remember when it ran at Chester, and it ran with the absolute choke out, and I still thought it ran really well in one of the Derby trials. And Freddie and Martin Mead brought it back at Windsor in a listed race, and it was far too good. I think that's going to have a good autumn and maybe beyond. And of course, please, as you say, with good to soft, don't worry about sort of good ground. I think the time was below standard rather. I think it was 2 seconds below standard, so don't worry about that. And at Goodwood on Saturday or Friday, or because there was a 3-day meeting, Sean Woods is a trainer I like, and his Savvy Knight may not have beat a great deal, but again, he's a horse who I sort of had, did I back it? Did I heck? But I think, as long as the handicapper doesn't overreact, and I think it's around about 20 to 1, I think, for the Cambridgeshire. And I was working out that with a £4 penalty, I think 86 got into the race last year, a mark of 86. And I think he was rated about 87 before. He'll only get a £4 penalty. So off a mark of 91, he really should get a run. And he would be, he will be my selection at this stage, anti-post for the Cambridgeshire.
Okay. And we'll ask you the same question. Obviously, we're going into the jump season. It's going to be sooner rather than later. I'll ask you the same question. Is there a horse, or is there, let's say, a few horses that you're really looking forward to seeing over the obstacles next season?
Shake 'em Up Harry, as was, and I was looking, I was asked to do something for a publication earlier in this week. And I did have a look at Shake 'em Up Harry, raced off 136 in the Red Run, finished third, ran a great race, down to 134. It was 138 to 136, or 136 to 134. Harry Redknapp owned it. It'll be a bit of a, but Pauling is a very good trainer. And hopefully, fingers crossed for him, he he's been, you know, when his horses have been hot, they've been really hot for about 2 weeks, and then they've lulled and think, let's hope he has a good, I think that's well handicapped. Hitman, I think that can win a grade 1 this year. My concern, again, when I read up that Paul Nicholls is considering upping it to 3 miles this year. He says it's a bit weak. He should know a bit more than me. I'm not convinced at this stage, but I think that's a grade 1 horse over, I would have thought up to 2.5 miles, but in Paul Nicholls we trust. And one other, did you say 3? A horse of Ollie Murphy's called Washington finished 3rd at Aintree in the conditional jockeys hurdle, which he should have won the year before with the horse that came out and won the Swinton, who missed the whole of last season. So that's another one I'm interested. But a horse called Washington, when it runs in the Tim Sider colours. I don't know if Dominic Burke is associated with it as well, and they're as thick as thieves. But I like this. I like this Washington, and I think that could be a well-handicapped horse. I think Ollie Murphy, I didn't think he had a great season last season. I don't think he went to the next level as maybe some of us thought he would. I think he might have some well-handicapped horses, but they would be my 3 over jumps as well.
Yeah, I think you bang on with some of them, especially with Ollie Murphy. He didn't have the greatest season of all time, but that means coming back this season, he's got some horses that will be much better than what their mark says. And Hitman, he's been a horse that Paul Nicholls has absolutely loved for the last 2 seasons, but he might just be a bit weak. But if you can get him bang on, he will be going close in grade 1s when he next season. So yeah, some great horses there. Thanks for that, Charlie. So just to finish it off, and we're going to do this with most guests that come on. We're just going to do a quick fire questions round, and just the first thing that pops into your head, we'll go with. Okay, so Cheltenham Festival or Royal Ascot?
Aintree.
Flat or jumps racing?
Jumps.
Hurdles or chase?
Chase.
Favorite horse of all time?
Dancing Brave.
Favorite race course?
Aintree. Where else?
Apart from the National, your favorite race?
Probably the Melling Chase at Aintree. Or the 3 days is fantastic. Sorry, it's got to be the Gold Cup. Other than that, the Gold Cup is the blue ribbons of jumps racing. Sorry, no, so, it would be the Gold Cup.
Okay. Your favourite trainer on both the flats and the jumps? So one each.
Sir Henry Cecil and Martin Piper.
Favourite jockey for both?
Ooh. I'm not really a great jockey sort of, fawn over jockeys at all. People know me would be, I'm sort of quite critical. I'll go Pat Edery and Ruby or Barry Geraghty. Ruby Walsh.
Okay, and just to finish, your best ever punting winner?
Oh, how long have you got? Well, it comes down to, I was an extra in the Grand National as well, by the way, in the film Champions. So it all comes down to the Grand National. And again, I was a haydock for that Beecher Chase. I'll always remember this, the Beecher Chase. And we came down in the lift, and One for Arthur, the horse, was owned by the Golfing Widows or something like that. Well, the 2 guys were in the lift with me. And One for Arthur had finished 4th. I'd backed him finishing like a train in the Beecher Chase. And we got chatting. And I said, you do know you're going to win the Grand National? And they went, oh, and again, if David Pipe thought I was soft Joe, these 2 guys really did think I was, really thought I was bonkers. And I said, yeah, and I actually told them, you've got to go and win the trial race at Warwick at the end of January. And then you'll get in. And then you win the Grand National. So all the time when it did win that race at Warwick under Derek Fox, and I backed it, and the Grand National, I've had plenty losers, and people like Mr. Snugfit and things I should have won and maybe didn't, and I backed Head Hunter when it finished 4th, and when it won the year after, I knew it wouldn't stay, and it did stay. But I think that One for Arthur year, because I did sort of suggest to a few people that, I did think that this was really, really well handicapped. And I think that would be the favourite race from a punting perspective. you know, I could have easily put in Hawkwing, you know, for the favourite race, flat race horse, despite the fact that he didn't win the 2,000 guineas. So, but yeah, I'll go with that. One for Arthur is a race, and sorry for me, it all come down to, you know, like all roads lead back to the Grand National, and what is sort of my spiritual. And would you believe I do have a house in Aintree?
I can definitely say that now after speaking to you here about the Grand National. I can definitely say that. Yeah, that's definitely. Charlie, thanks so much for answering all our questions, and obviously, honestly, the stories have been absolutely brilliant to hear. And we wish you all the best going forward. So thank you, Charlie, and thanks for coming on TWE Meets.